Saheed had been living in the same Face Me I Face You compound in Mushin for almost 4 years, and in all that time, he had never been this low. Life had been throwing stones at him one by one, but now it seemed as if someone had finally decided to carry a whole block and drop it on his head. His small electronics repair business at Ojuelegba was barely crawling. Customers brought old phones and radios to fix, but they would disappear when it was time to collect them, leaving him with gadgets he couldn't sell and no money to use. Some owed him for repairs. They had promised to pay next week, but 3 months later, they still showed up smiling as if nothing was wrong. His stall rent was already late and food had become so scarce that sometimes dinner was nothing but a small loaf of bread and sachet water. And as if hunger and death were not enough, there was his landlord, Baba Alani. Baba Alani was an elderly man who enjoyed flexing his little power the way some people enjoyed watching football. He wore the same faded Ankara trousers and short-sleeved shirts almost every day, and there was always a toothpick dangling from the corner of his mouth as if it was part of his uniform. He walked around the compound with his pot belly in front and his hands clapped behind his back, stopping to comment on people's laundry, people's visitors, and even the smell coming from people's cooking pots. Saheed owed him 3 months' rent, and although he had been promising to pay, the truth was that the money was simply not there. He had told Baba Alani that once one particular customer cleared a big repair bill, he would settle the debts in full. But Baba Alani had heard too many stories like that from too many tenants. Now, his patience had dried up like Hamatan leaves. The compound was a place where privacy was a luxury, and everybody knew everybody's business, whether you liked it or not. Mama Shade, who sold pepper and tomatoes at the junction, lived 2 doors away from Saheed and had a mouth like a radio that never went off. Tunde, the bachelor who lived next to Saheed's door, was his closest ally in the compound. They often sat on the corridor in the evenings, fanning themselves and talking about the price of Gary, the madness of Lagos traffic, and how landlords seemed to grow wickedness like a farm crop. Children ran up and down the narrow passage, sometimes bumping into adults and laughing as they escaped scolding. It was in this noisy, cramped compound that Saheed tried to keep a low profile. He hated owing people. It made him feel small and embarrassed. And every time he saw Baba Alani's round figure at the faraway end of the corridor, his heart would fly off. Sometimes the landlord would pass without a word, and sometimes he would stop and say things like, "Saheed, I hope you are not thinking you can live in my house for free. Oh. Even in the Bible, you must pay for where you are sleeping." Saheed would nod politely and mumble promises, but inside him, he was afraid. He knew the man was not going to let this debt go, but he hoped, foolishly perhaps, that he could avoid public disgrace until he found a way to pay. He still remembered the stories of how Baba Alani once removed a tenant's zinc sheet during rainy season, and another time carried a woman's cooking stove to his own house for safekeeping until she paid up. So, when Saheed lay down that night, staring at the cracked ceiling and thinking about how to raise even half the rent, he didn't know that Baba Alani had already decided to motivate him to pay. And what Baba Alani had in mind would not just embarrass him quietly, it would throw his private life wide open to the whole street. It was a hot Thursday afternoon in Mushin. The sun had no mercy that day, and the street smelled of fried akara and exhaust fumes. Saheed was already at his stall in Ojuelegba, hunched over a stubborn DVD player that refused to cooperate, when his phone started ringing inside his pocket. He ignored it at first, thinking it was one of those customers who liked to call every hour to check the progress of their work without bringing the balance. But when it rang again and again, he finally pulled it out. It was Tunde from the compound, and his voice was urgent. "Saheed, where you dey? "I dey work," Said said. "Why you dey ask?" Tunde lowered his voice as though he was delivering bad news at a funeral. "Our landlord don carry carpenter enter your room." Said frowned. "Carpenter? For wetin?" "My brother," Tunde sighed. "Na your door o. Dem don begin unscrew am. I say make I tell you before dem go finish work." At first, Said thought it was a joke. He even chuckled nervously. "You dey whine me?" But Tunde's tone didn't change. "If I dey whine you, make I fall down for here. Better start coming now unless you want your room to be as open as bus stop." By the time Said closed his stall and rushed home, his heart was beating like a gidigbo drum. He entered the compound to find exactly what Tunde had said. Two sweaty carpenters were crouched by his doorway. One was already holding the hinges in his palm, while the other was balancing the entire wooden door against his shoulder. And standing nearby like a general inspecting his soldiers was Baba Alani, with one hand behind his back and the other holding a toothpick he kept chewing with unnecessary seriousness. Said, welcome," Baba Alani said, as if nothing unusual was happening. "Since you no wan open your pockets, I decided to open your life for you. Maybe if everybody can see your inside, you go remember say you dey owe me." Neighbors had already gathered. Some pretended to be shocked, but others were clearly enjoying the drama. Mama Shade was whispering loudly to the woman beside her. "Shebi I tell you say this man dey find trouble. See as landlord catch am today." Children were giggling and darting in and out of the corridor to peep into Said's exposed room. "Baba, you for at least wait make I," Said began, but Baba Alani cut him off with a wave. "Wait? I don't wait for 3 months. If mosquito and rats enter your room freely, maybe your rent money will also enter my hand freely. Abi no be so?" He grinned, clearly pleased with his own joke. When the carpenters were done, they carried the door like a trophy and leaned it against the wall beside Baba Alani's parlor. And now, Said's small mattress, his folded clothes in a plastic chair, and his battered television were all on display to the world. That night was pure torture for him. He kept propping up a piece of plywood for privacy, but the wind kept blowing it over. Mosquitoes treated him as if he was the only blood bank in Lagos. Drunk passers-by peeked in to greet him. Even a stray goat wandered into his room at some point, ate from his garri in the basin, and strode out slowly as if mocking him. Unfortunately, by the next morning, the whole street had heard about Said's doorless room. In a mushy face me I face you compound, bad news travels faster than good news, and so, as soon as the sun came up, people walking past slowed down to take a curious look. Hawkers selling bread and akara craned their necks as they passed, while school children laughed and pointed as if his room was an exhibit at a zoo. Now, it wasn't just that his belongings were exposed, it was the way people also spoke to him. Mama Shade greeted him at the well with exaggerated pity, and her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hey ya, Said my pikin, sorry oh, this our landlord dey do pass himself." But before Said could answer, she added, "Next time, you self try pay your rent on time. You know say this man no get joy." The last part stung more than the first. Throughout that day, the corridor became a parade ground for his embarrassment. The young men who played draughts outside the compound made loud jokes whenever he passed. "Said, abeg, how you dey sleep for open air cinema?" one called out. Another one shouted, "You better no sleep naked for night oh, CCTV don dey watch you." Even Tunde, who had been sympathetic at first, couldn't resist laughing when a wind gust blew Said's makeshift curtain aside, just as two market women were passing. They then stood in front of his room, gisting as if his room was a shop. "Abeg, close am small now," Tunde said, trying to hide his laughter. On the second evening, it became worse as the open doorway became an invitation for every nuisance in the neighborhood. Stray cats slinked in, sniffing around for food. Cockroaches staged military parades across the floor. Even the compound goat returned, and this time he was boldly chewing Said's remaining yam before he chased it away. but the worst was the mosquitoes. With no door to keep them out, they feasted on Saheed in shifts. He slapped his arms, legs and face until his skin was sore. Sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford at this point, and as he laid there in the dark, he kept seeing Baba Alani's smug face mocking him. At a point, Saheed couldn't bear it anymore, so he went to sit outside on the corridor, staring into the distance while his neighbors talked loudly nearby. He overheard Baba Alani boasting to two other men about how he handled stubborn tenants. "I know they waste time for people wey won't play smart with me. If you owe me, I go show you pepper. If shame no kill you, shame go humble you." The men laughed. One even clapped for him and said, "You dey try, Baba. That is how to treat them." Saheed looked away, pretending not to listen, but he was dying inside. Later that night, Tunde came to sit beside him. "Guy, you no fit continue like this, so this man dey use you catch cruise." "I know," Saheed said quietly, "but im own day go come, na just small patience." It was then that Tunde mentioned something interesting, a piece of information that lit a small spark in Saheed's mind. Baba Alani was planning to host a big landlords meeting in his compound that weekend. Important people were coming, and Baba Alani had been bragging about how his house was the model compound in the area. Saheed didn't say much. He just nodded slowly and went back to staring into the darkness. Saheed didn't rush into revenge. He knew Baba Alani was a loud man, but also a suspicious one. If he made any sudden moves, the landlord would smell trouble from a mile away. So, for the next 2 days, Saheed played the role of a broken, humbled tenant. He greeted the landlord respectfully, even calling him Baba Landlord, sir, in a way that made the older man puff up with self-importance. "Ah, Saheed, my boy," Baba Alani said one morning as they met by the well. "You see how fresh air they do you good? Maybe you can think better now about how to pay me." Saheed forced a smile. "Yes, sir, fresh air they enter well. However, behind that fake humility, Saheed's mind was working. Tunde's information about the landlord's meeting was like gold. He had even seen by himself how Baba Alani was going around the compound boasting that important landlords and community leaders were coming to his compound that Saturday. He wanted to impress them and show them that he was not just any landlord but a well-respected figure in Mushin. Saheed knew one thing about men like Baba Alani: their reputation meant everything to them. Humiliate them in private and they would back, but humiliate them in public and they would beg. He began observing Baba Alani's habits more closely. Every morning, the landlord left his parlor door wide open as he moved chairs around or fetched items from the small storeroom at the back. On market days, he would even step out for 30 to 40 minutes to buy malt drinks and snacks from the shop down the street. By Thursday evening, Saheed already had a simple plan that when Tunde heard it, he laughed until tears rolled down his cheeks. "Guy, this one go enter history for compound gist, but we go need correct timing, no." On Friday morning, Saheed secretly borrowed a set of screwdrivers from a friendly roadside carpenter and kept them hidden under his bed. That evening, while pretending to be patching the clothes curtain that served as his temporary door, he watched the landlord pacing around, counting chairs, inspecting his parlor and giving instructions to his teenage son about sweeping every corner. And then on Saturday, the D-Day, Saheed woke up early, took his bath and dressed like a man with no worries in the world. He even brought puff-puff from the woman at the junction and greeted everyone cheerfully. This made the landlord drop his guard even more. By late morning, Baba Alani stepped out to buy the bottled water he planned to serve his guests, and that was when Saheed gave Tunde a signal from his window. Tunde nodded at him. They both sneaked out quietly and crossed to the landlord's flat. Saheed bent to the the hinges and used the screwdriver quickly. Within minutes, the door came loose. They carried it together and placed it right in the middle of the compound where everyone passing could see, so as to make it as visible as possible. To complete the scene, Sahid pulled out a big piece of cardboard and wrote in bold letters with black marker, "Door seeking rent from owner, arrogance overdue." He leaned the cardboard against the door, stepped back and admired his work. It was perfect, simple and sharp. Now, all that was left was to wait for the meeting to begin. By the time the first guests arrived for Baba Alani's landlord's meeting, Baba Alani was not yet back. They slowed down and blinked at the strange sight. One of them, a tall man in a neatly pressed senator outfit, paused to read the sign aloud. "Door seeking rent from owner, arrogance overdue." He laughed out loud. Alani, what is the meaning of this one?" Before anyone could answer, a group of children from the next street trooped in as if they were on a school excursion, pointing and laughing. "Open house! Open house!" They chanted and skipped around the exposed doorway as if they were playing 10-10. At this point, the landlord's sitting room was in full view. There were mismatched plastic chairs, an old ceiling fan groaning in the heat, and curtains with palm oil stains that had seen better years. The guests had no choice but to walk past the wide open frame, stepping over the threshold as if they were entering a construction site. Sahid, who was leaning against the corridor door, pretended to be adjusting his curtain, but neighbors knew better. Tunde stood beside him, eating chin-chin with the satisfaction of a man watching premium entertainment. By the time Baba Alani returned from the shop, carrying 2 packs of bottled water, the compound was a scene. People were pointing at the cardboard, shaking their heads and laughing mockingly. He stopped in his tracks and looked around in confusion. Then he saw his own door on public display like a tenant's disgrace trophy. For a long moment, he just stood there sweating like a goat. Who did this?" he shouted out of anger and embarrassment. Mama Shade, who always loved to stir trouble, shouted from her corner, "Baba landlord, no vex so. Maybe your door too won't breathe fresh air small. You know say breeze dey good for everybody." The whole crowd burst into laughter. Well, the guests were polite enough not to laugh openly, but their smirks were obvious. One man muttered just loud enough for others to hear, "Somebody that cannot secure his own door wants to secure tenants. Wonders shall never end." Baba Alani cleaned his face of shame and muttered an apology, after which they began the meeting, but the humiliation deepened when, midway through the meeting, 2 little boys chased a ball straight into the sitting room. They didn't even stop to apologize. They just retrieved the ball and ran out again giggling. Another neighbor, pretending to be helpful, asked loudly, "Baba landlord, you won't make we help you guard the entrance? Anybody fit waka enter like that too?" By now, the once boastful landlord was red-faced with embarrassment and shame. His guests whispered among themselves and exchanged glances that said they would never let him forget this day. And just like that, whatever pride Baba Alani had been preparing to showcase was blown away like harmattan dust. By the time the landlord's meeting finally dragged to an end, the compound felt different. The guests were living in 2s and 3s, but the gist they were carrying away wasn't about whatever community matter they had discussed. It was about the landlord who hosted a meeting without a front door. They left shaking their heads in shame. Baba Alani walked them to the gate with a nervous smile, but his eyes were darting around, scanning for who might have done this to him. His usual booming voice was now subdued, and his proud stride had lost its authority. He waited by the gate as the last guest left. Then, immediately, he turned back towards the compound like a man preparing for war. Sahid was seated on the corridor, eating bread and beans from a plastic plate, while Tunde sat beside him, sipping a sachet of pure water and wearing the innocent look of a man who had seen nothing, heard nothing. The landlord stopped in front of Saheed and squinted. "Saheed, where were you when this nonsense happened?" Saheed looked up from his beans with genuine looking confusion. "Me? I dey around though, but Baba landlord, I no fit even understand how this kind thing take happen. Na so door just dey waka now." A loud laughter came from the far end of the corridor, but it quickly died when Baba Alani shot a glare in that direction. He stared at Saheed for a long moment, then he sighed, not in defeat but in reluctant acceptance that there was nothing he could do without looking worse. After all, he didn't even have any evidence. And so, that evening, two of Baba Alani's own boys came and fixed his door. And surprisingly, they also carried Saheed's door from where it had been leaning without a word. They reattached it to the hinges and screwed it in place. Saheed leaned in the doorway and watched them walk with a faint smile. When they were done, the landlord appeared again, and much to Saheed's own shock, his tone was softer than it had ever been in months. "Look, Saheed, just dey try pay small, no problem. We no be enemies." Saheed smiled and nodded slowly. "I hear you, Baba landlord, no wahala. I go do my best." And just like that, from that day on, Baba Alani's attitude changed. He still paraded around the compound, still gossiped with Mama Shade, he still boasted to visitors, but he never again removed a tenant's door or roof. The memory of his own doorless shame was now stitched into the fabric of compound gist, and whenever someone wanted to humble him, they just needed to bring it up again. As for Saheed, well, up till now, whenever the story came up, he never admitted anything. He would just smile and say, if someone carries your door to the market, sometimes the best thing to do is to help him carry his own there too. That way, everybody will understand that the market is not for one person alone. Thank you for watching the story. Kindly share your thoughts about the story with me in the comment section. Share the story out with your loved ones and give the story a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you've not done so by now. Until I bring another story your way. Bye!